Welcome back. So, in this episode, I'm going to be talking about addictions. And the reason I'm talking about that is just with everything going on in the world, with the civil unrest, with the coronavirus, making everyone have to stay indoors for a long period of time and social distance and cut out the socializing. I think that addictions are people are more susceptible to addictions now than they have ever been, because that's the real root of what creates addictions, or what makes it significantly easier to get into addiction, is to be in a highly intense situation. I think that it's kind of what led me to my own understanding of addictions is through mental health and depression and mental unhappiness, and just the desire to numb yourself. Because that's, what a lot of all addictions have in common is that they are a numbing substance. And so whether it's an actual physical numbing or if it's a mind numbing, but the physical numbing, it eventually leads to the mind numbing. But that's what they all have in common, is this sense of feeling pain, of feeling overwhelmed, and you just want to escape it, and you don't really care what the cost is. And so that's the sad thing, is a lot of times you're giving up your long-term health for immediate gratification. It's not, a lot of times addictions aren't a matter of being selfish. I mean, I know that there's an aspect to that. But the main part of addictions, like I said, is just more feeling overwhelmed mentally and emotionally. And so you use a substance to escape that. And the problem with that is it's a temporary fix. And a lot of times it mucks your life up more. And so you're going to need to escape more. And so, I remember which Austin Powers it was. It was either second or third, with a Scottish bagpipe. I don't want to say his name because it's a bad word. His name is Fat Illegitimate Child, and I'd say it's actually illegitimate. Yeah, but there's a point where he breaks down and talks about how he is depressed because he eats, and he eats because he's depressed, and it's just funny because it's just a joke of a movie. It's not meant to be serious at all, and yet that is actually how addictions create. I refer to it as depression and mental unhappiness and mental health is perpetual energy, in that it feeds off of itself, and the more energy you give it, the stronger it gets, and the more almost unstoppable it becomes. And so for discussing addictions, you can look at the different aspects of addictions. There's the really obvious ones that I think probably get the most attention, as far as us acknowledging them, like drugs and alcohol, maybe even you'd say tobacco. But I think you can broaden that very easily and very accurately and say that food is an addictive thing. You can say that entertainment, that video games are addictive. Pretty much anything that again is just removing yourself from pain, superficially, is can create an addiction for it. Because I think that's that rather than us trying to simply identify the substances that we can be addicted to and depriving ourselves, because that's, to me, a huge mistake from our part, as far as trying to approach addictions and treat them simply as the substance is the problem. And I'm like, the substance isn't the problem. It's too much of the substance is the problem, and why you're using the substance that's the problem. But the real problem is why you're wanting to use it to begin with. It's the pain. And so for myself, I just don't like how a lot of addictions are approached, because they're approached, one, a lot of times people will do I want to say interventions or such, and which I always thought was just bizarre, because in some cases, I'm sure some people aren't self-aware to why they realize they're hurting their family, but I'm pretty sure a lot of people who are addicted are quite aware that they're hurting their family. And that's one of the reasons probably why they use their substance, is to escape that guilt. And so I don't see how circling, essentially cornering them, and then emotionally guilting them into seeking help, is actually going to make them feel this sense of relief, a sense of let's make a step. And in some cases, I think too, a lot of times, so there's three different ways I think people react a lot of times to those interventions. One, they just shut down. They literally just block everything out and just let people talk, and then just run. Two, they play along. They act like they're going to, and then second, out the door, again, they're back with their addiction. And then three, I think that it's just something where, yes, they break down emotionally, and they're like, yes, I want to get help. But the problem is once they're away from that emotional high, and they're away from their loved ones, their addictive mind, their mental pain starts eating at them again. So a lot of times, Even if they try, they could easily relapse. They could easily, because again, you're not identifying the real nature of why you're addicted to the substance. You're identifying the substance as the source of your addiction, which is not true. It's not accurate. And so if you misdiagnose something, if you say that the fire is being started from this source, and in fact the fire is being started by some sort of electrical outlet or something, you're going to have to keep putting the fire out again and again and again, because the source is thriving. The source is still there. And so even if you kick an addiction, you might be very likely to either relapse or find a different addiction, but because you beat your first addiction, you think you're okay. And so again, I'm not trying to bring people down and say it's hopeless. I think it's just important to identify why we become addicted to things and how we need to approach them, because I'm a big believer in results. And it's not to say that depriving ourselves of a substance is nothing. I do think that we do need to taper it back, but I think that for myself, I think it's far more important to focus on the mental health and of the person who's addicted, so that they're much more. I say they're set up to succeed. It's kind of like training for a marathon. You don't just set these grand goals of running a full marathon. You build up to it. You figure out, what do I need to do to accomplish that? I need to condition myself. I need to get myself, in impeccable strength. I need to give myself a very good diet with high protein. And so and again, hydrate frequently. You can't just hydrate that day. And so there's a lot to put into being successful at a marathon. And, I think that in many cases, kicking an addiction effectively is very much like a mental marathon, and that it's going to take training. It's going to take identifying everything that needs to take place in order to succeed, rather than simply, rushing towards the fire and saying, we need to put it out. We need to put it out. We need to understand the fire. We need to understand how it's going to spread before we can put it out effectively. It's a lot like popping the head of a daisy off. Or not daisy, what the frick are those weeds? Dandelion. Yes, it's like popping the top off of weed. It's just going to grow back. If you don't uproot the roots of the weed, it's going to keep coming back. And so you have to really diagnose what's the effective steps, not simply visually take it out of your vision, and so therefore it doesn't exist. Because out of sight, out of mind, it might be good in some aspects, but it's not effective. It's not going to last. And so you're going to have to keep trying to figure out. And a lot of times too, for myself anyways, I would say, if you relapse, if you kick an addiction and then move on to a different addiction, having a second addiction is a very defeating feeling, because you already feel like, I've been here, I put in the hard work, I proved myself. And so emotionally, it can really weigh you down significantly more than the previous addiction, because of that relapse, what it does to you mentally. So for myself, I haven't been addicted to one substance. It was one of those things where, after my twin was killed, I did drink a lot for several years. And at the time, my twin brother was killed the day after our 20th birthday. So I was already a partier. And again, I was in college. And so, me partying wasn't abnormal. It was just the fact that I made a point to make sure that I drank a lot every time. I probably got drunk at least 2 or 3 times a week, every week, and made sure I was it. And a lot of times I would end up, getting upset because of my twin's death. But again, it was just something where, I never let it really consume me to the point where I was losing my job and my relationships and such. It just was something where I definitely like to use it to escape. But again, that was the thing, was I think that there was a little self-awareness of that. Like, I knew I wasn't going to let it get worse. And so I didn't really understand what was feeding that desire. It was more just the fact that I always felt good if I was drunk. I didn't have to feel my pain. So the second thing I got into was pills. And again, too, I was blessed in the fact that it didn't consume me. It was just something where the first time I had taken a pill was I was out with my buddy drinking. And so I was already drunk. So I already was just feeling like $1 million and didn't really care. And so, again, that was something where I probably did that for a few weeks. But again, it didn't really, it didn't escalate into anything. It wasn't anything that it became an inherent problem. So so over the years and years, that was one thing I noticed, though, was, even playing like video games or, snacking on food late. That was one of the things that I noticed, was that mentally I was more susceptible to caving into this desire to be happy now, and I don't care what the effects are to my life. When I was drinking when I was younger, in my college years and such, after my twin's death, frankly, I didn't care if I had died. And that's kind of just how I lived my life. Was I just didn't really have a lot of motivations to live, or motivation to live. And again, there were certain good things in my life that was going on. But mentally, like I said, that's the nature of an addictive personality, that someone's going to be more susceptible, is that someone who doesn't really care about the ramifications of their actions. And how I looked at life that way was because of the trauma I had been through. And so, like I'm saying, when you're trying to fight addictions, or if you know somebody who struggles with addictions, like I said, I'm not too. I mean, obviously there are certain substances that are excessively dangerous, but ultimately speaking, it's that you lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. And so, I feel like a lot of times, when, like I say, you're confronting somebody with an addiction, you're trying to, you're trying to pull the horse's neck towards the water. It's just more stubborn. It's more, I'm going to do it on my time. And like I said, I think it's just important to just let the horse know the water's there. Whenever you're ready to drink, it's there. And again, just because ultimately we may think, but if I'm not pushy, then something might happen. They might OD, they might, some tragedy may strike, which I completely understand. Like I said, it was one of those things that I felt guilt for my twin's death. I wish that I had, talked. I mean, again, I don't think it would have worked talking him out of deploying and such. I mean, it's not an option really. But even then, it's just one of those things where realizing that, like, when you're trying to deal with somebody who's got an addiction and getting help, you need to do what's effective, not do what you think is best. And so that's the thing, is that there's a sniper saying that says slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And so to me, that's how you need to approach it. Is, yes, you might be battering somebody to get help today, because you're worried tomorrow that something might happen. But because you're constantly harassing them, and they might ignore your phone calls for a month. And so it's just one of those things where, like I said, is that it's probably more likely that they'll act quicker if you're much more compassionate and much more at their pace. If you're much more, I want to do whatever you need me to do to help you. But I think the more pushy people can become and are, the less likely the person is to get help. And again, it's about results. It's not about, I think a lot of the times there's a sense of guilt, like somehow we should have done something, or we could have done something. And it's just one of those things where, I think so many of us are good, genuine people. And if we saw our loved one, lying in front of us, we would certainly help them. And if we knew for a fact that there was an action that we could have taken to prevent anything from happening to our loved one, I know that we would have done that. It's something for my twin. If there was anything I could have done to stop my brother from being killed, I certainly would have done it. And so I think that that's what you need to do, is just be real with yourself, as far as knowing that truth about yourself. As honestly, so many of us would do anything and everything to protect our loved ones. And so it's just something where if something happens in front of us, we certainly will take action. But like I said, I think it's important for people to understand the mind of an addiction and the people who are addicted to substances, because, again, too, even just like, one thing I've struggled with, and it's kind of been on and off, is cigarettes. And it's one of those things where I've had family members talk to me about it and about how it's not good for me. And it's just one of those things where I'm like, I know it's not good for me. I see the warning label on every freaking pack I've bought. And, I'm not delusional. I'm not living in a cave. Anybody who knows anything about cigarettes knows they're not good for you. So you badgering me about the problem, about how it's not good for my health, and now I've got kids, and that's, I should be here for them and take care of my health and such. Making me feel more guilt is just going to make me smoke more cigarettes. And so that's what I mean. It's about results. It's not about, it's just one of those things where, especially too with all the uncertainty in life, there's certainly a certain level of, there are no guarantees in life. You can be as safe as you possibly want to be. You can never use anything dangerous, and you can still succumb to death. But I do think that, like I said, a big part of it is just identifying how can you kick the habit, how can you kick the addiction, and what's driving you to that addiction. Because like I said, is once you remove the main motivator, the main source of power to your addiction, kicking the substance is going to be significantly easier. not to be too simplistic, but if my children had a Marine escort everywhere they went, and I had, a 6-figure, 7 figure salary, and I had no mortgage, and if all these things in my life that create senses of strain and senses of worry were removed, I would be far more easier to not cave to any kind of type of escapism that I might want to pursue. And so again, it's just a matter for myself, anyways, of really just trying to do better every day. It's not a matter of going. I mean, and some people have to go cold turkey, and if that's the way that you can only succeed in these certain things, then if that's the way it is, then certainly commit to it. But for myself, I think how I look at my addictions and the things that I've struggled with are simply just a matter of toning it down, of getting a grasp of what I'm doing and what would be real steps forward with getting better at it. Again, it's one of those things where, I don't struggle with alcohol. I mean, I probably drink a couple times a week. But again, too, there are weeks where I don't. But I would say that if I was drinking every day, or if I was drinking 5 of 7 days a week, then, probably how I'd look at it is, take 2 days off. And then once that becomes more and more natural, once I'm used to being, sober on Mondays and Tuesdays, then, try to add one more day, but progressively do it. Like I said, it's like training for a marathon. You really have to take it in stride. You really have to have realistic goals. I think like a lot of the times people have these grand plans for their life, which is great. That can be the end goal. That can be like the 5-year plan or something. But, within the month, I want to be running so many miles and doing this and this and only eating salads, and they just burn themselves out because just such an extreme shift, like I said, is depriving yourself of escapism, of a certain type of mental release with entertainment, with movies or video games or eating food or so forth. To me, it can be emotionally destructive because you're just so used to that euphoria that's created by it. And so by completely depriving yourself, you're really pushing yourself up against a wall. And so, I'm not trying to say, to keep up your addiction if you're able to move forward, but I just want people to make realistic steps so that they don't backslide completely. I don't think that if you're used to having a dinner of 14 cheeseburgers and you're thinking I'm going to have salads for the next 6 months and lose all this weight, it's probably not going to happen. I would cut it down to, like, instead of 14 cheeseburgers, how about 4 or 5? Just make those realistic steps. And again, it's not going to immediately show results, but it's one of those things where if you want a lasting effect from getting away from something you're addicted to, I think it's important to like I say, to be the tortoise and not be the hare, because I think you're going to burn yourself out, become overconfident, and then you're going to lose the race. But again, there's just lots and lots of elements that need to be discussed. But as always, good luck and good night.